Part 1. The Unexpected Guests Extended Version 1000 Words. The rain came down hard that morning, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm that filled the quiet house. Emily sat curled on the couch, watching water race down the glass while holding a half-empty mug of coffee that had already gone cold. Her father had left for a week-long business trip in Chicago, asking her to stay at the house while he was gone. It was supposed to be a calm, quiet week time to rest, think, and enjoy a little peace away from the city. But peace, she was about to learn, doesn't always last long. A knock came at the door. Firm, unexpected, and out of place in the stillness. Emily frowned, setting her mug down and walking to the entryway. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, 3 familiar faces greeted her through the misty rainmark. Daniel and Steve, her dad's old college friends. They looked older than she remembered, faces lined with years of laughter and work. But there was a light in their eyes that time hadn't dimmed. "Hey, Em," Mark said with a grin, brushing rain from his jacket. "Your dad said we could drop by to talk about the reunion." "Sorry to show up like this," Emily blinked in surprise. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming." "Yeah, he mentioned it last week," Steve added, shaking water off his hat. "We were in the area. The rain started pouring, and we thought we'd wait it out here, Riff. That's all right." She hesitated for only a moment. It wasn't exactly planned, but they were her dad's closest friends. They had known her since she was little, seen her grow up through stories, visits, and the occasional family barbecue. She couldn't leave them standing in the rain. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." The 3 men entered, bringing the scent of rain and the faint chill of the outdoors with them. The quiet house suddenly felt different, warmer, louder, alive. Emily fetched towels, letting them dry off while she headed to the kitchen to make coffee. She could hear them talking in the living room, laughing about how her dad used to get lost on road trips or burn toast every morning in college. Their voices filled the house like music from another time. When she came back with the coffee tray, they were already looking around, admiring old photographs on the mantel. Her dad in his 20s, standing beside them, all grinning like the world belonged to them. Seeing those pictures made her heart ache a little. Her dad had been so full of energy once. Now he mostly worked, stayed tired, and talked about retirement. "Wow," Daniel said softly when she set the tray down. "You really grew up, Emily. Last time I saw you, you were, what, 15? She smiled politely. "That sounds about right," smiled back, his eyes kind but thoughtful. Daniel had always been the quiet one, the listener, the one who said little but noticed everything. She remembered him teaching her how to ride a bike one summer when her dad was away on business. There had always been something calm and steady about him. They talked for a while about the reunion, old memories, and how fast time had gone by. Mark told stories that made everyone laugh until tears came, while Steve teased him for exaggerating. Emily found herself laughing too, surprised at how icily they made her feel comfortable. Still, every now and then, her eyes drifted toward Daniel. He wasn't loud like the others. He just watched, smiled, and occasionally asked her questions about her work, her life, her plans. His voice was soft, deep, and easy to listen to. There was something familiar about it, something safe. Outside, the rain kept falling. The afternoon grew darker, the sky a wash of gray and silver. Mark suggested lighting the fireplace, and soon the soft crackle of flames joined their voices. The whole room glowed in shades of amber and gold. Emily sat with her legs tucked under her, feeling the warmth spread across her skin. Mark leaned back and said, "You know, your dad used to talk about this house like it was a dream. He always wanted to make it feel like home again. Guess he finally did." Emily smiled faintly. "He loves this place. He said it's the one thing that makes him feel settled." Steve nodded, staring into the fire. "We all get to that point, I guess. Life gets louder, and then you start chasing quiet." The word stuck with her, because that was how she felt too, like she'd been chasing quiet for a long time. Work, city life, people, expectations, all became noise. And yet here in this old house, with the rain and the fire and 3 kind men who spoke about memories instead of money or deadlines, she felt something close to peace. As the afternoon faded into evening, the rain softened into a drizzle. Emily stood to refill their cups, and when she returned, she found Daniel alone in the kitchen washing the dishes she had left in the sink. "You don't have to do that," she said. Setting the tray down, he smiled without turning. "Old habits. I like helping." She leaned against the counter, watching him for a moment. "You're still the same." He looked over his shoulder. "Still quiet, you mean?" "Still kind," she corrected. For a second, their eyes met. The moment stretched, gentle, silent, but full of meaning. Then Mark called out from the other room, breaking it. Daniel smiled and went back to rinsing a plate. Later, when the rain stopped completely, the men decided to stay for dinner. Emily threw together something simple: pasta salad, garlic bread. It wasn't fancy, but they insisted it was the best meal they'd had in weeks. The conversation turned lighter again. Laughter filled the dining room, the kind of laughter that comes easily when people are comfortable. When memories mix with the present, by the time the clock struck 9, the storm had fully passed. The men stood by the door, getting ready to leave. Mark thanked her for the warmth. Steve hugged her lightly. And Daniel lingered for just a moment longer. "Thanks for letting us in," he said quietly. "Your dad was right, this place really does feel like home." She smiled. "You're always welcome here." He nodded once, his eyes soft, and followed the others out into the damp. Moonlit night. When the door closed, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt fuller, like the house had taken a deep breath after years of stillness. Emily walked to the window and watched their car disappear down the road. The porch light reflected in the puddles, the air cool and fresh after the rain. For a long moment she stood there, thinking about the laughter, the warmth, the memories that had filled the evening. Something in her had changed, something small but deep, like the first spark of light after a storm. She didn't know it yet, but letting them in that day was going to change far more than just one rainy afternoon. It was going to reopen doors she didn't even know were closed. And as the last drops of rain slid down the glass, Emily whispered to herself, almost like a secret, "Maybe quiet isn't what I needed after all." Then she turned off the light and walked upstairs, unaware that the story had only just begun. Part 2, The Evening That Felt Different, extended version, 1,000 words. The rain stopped just before sunset, leaving the sky painted in soft shades of orange and pink. The air outside smelled fresh, like the world had been washed clean. Inside the house, Emily moved quietly through the kitchen, tidying up from lunch, her mind still replaying the laughter and stories from earlier. The warmth that had filled the house hadn't faded. It lingered in every corner, in every quiet moment. She had thought the visit was over, but when she stepped into the living room, Mark was still there with Daniel and Steve. "Looks like the roads are flooded," Mark said, glancing out the window. "We might need to stay a little longer till it clears up." Emily nodded. "It's fine. You can wait here. I was about to make dinner anyway." Steve grinned. "You sure your dad's okay with us invading his place like this?" Emily laughed softly. "You're his best friends. I'm sure he wouldn't mind." As she walked back to the kitchen, she could hear them talking again, voices full of energy, teasing one another, sharing half-finished stories. It made the house feel alive in a way she hadn't realized she'd missed. She tied her hair back and started chopping vegetables. The sound of rain had been replaced by quiet music from the small speaker on the counter, something mellow and warm. After a few minutes, she noticed someone behind her. It was Daniel. He leaned against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her work. "You don't have to cook for us," he said, his voice low and calm. "It's no trouble." She replied without looking up. "I like cooking when it's raining or after the rain. Makes things feel peaceful." He stepped closer. "Then let me help." Emily hesitated, then handed him a knife. "All right. Just don't complain if the vegetables aren't perfect." He smiled and they started working side by side. At first, the silence felt noticeable, but soon it turned easy, even comforting. They talked about small things: his work in Seattle, her freelance projects, the town, their favorite books. There wasn't anything romantic or dramatic about it. It was simply two people connecting through quiet conversation. But somewhere in the middle of chopping and stirring, she began to notice how natural it felt to have him there. "Your dad used to say you were stubborn," Daniel said with a half smile. "Looks like he was right." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "He said that about everyone who didn't agree with him." "True," Daniel said, and for a moment their eyes met. Something in his expression made her chest tighten, a look that wasn't loud or obvious, but full of understanding. When the food was ready, she carried the dishes to the table while Daniel poured the wine Mark had found in the cabinet. Steve whistled when he saw the meal. "Wow, Emily, this looks amazing. Your dad's going to regret missing this." They all sat together, talking and laughing like old friends. The golden light from the lamps softened the room and outside. Crickets began to sing, for the first time in a long while. Emily felt surrounded by warmth, not just the kind that comes from food or comfort, but from connection. Halfway through dinner, Mark started telling stories again, how they used to race down the coast in Daniel's old car, how Steve once tried to impress a girl by singing terribly at a wedding, how Emily's dad was the one who always got them out of trouble. Emily laughed so hard that tears filled her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed laughing like that. But even as she laughed, she noticed Daniel. He wasn't telling stories like the others. He just watched her, smiling quietly, like he was seeing something important. When their eyes met again, she felt her heartbeat skip for a second. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was deep. Like he understood something she didn't have to say. Later that evening, the dishes were done, the laughter had faded into soft music, and Mark suggested they sit outside. The porch was still damp from the rain, but the air was cool and clear. Emily wrapped herself in a light blanket and stepped outside with them. The world smelled of earth and leaves. Fireflies blinked in the distance, and somewhere far away, thunder rumbled softly. Mark and Steve talked about their families' grown children, jobs, old dreams. Emily listened, her chin resting on her hand. It was strange hearing these men, who once seemed larger than life, speak about missing time and wishing they'd done things differently. Daniel sat beside her, quiet as always. After a long pause, he said, "It's strange how people drift apart, isn't it? You don't notice it happening until one day you realize how far you've gone." She nodded. "I guess that's just how life works. Everyone gets busy. Everyone moves on." "Do you believe that?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "I'm not sure. I think sometimes people just stop trying." Their eyes met again, and for a moment, there was nothing else, no porch, no voices, just the quiet weight of something unspoken between them. Inside, Mark started laughing again, breaking the spell. Steve joined in, and soon their laughter drifted out into the night air. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. Emily watched him, realizing he wasn't like the others. There was something steady about him, something she found herself drawn to. When the clock neared midnight, Mark and Steve decided to head out before it got too late. The floodwaters had started to drain, and the roads were clear again. They said their goodbyes, full of hugs and promises to visit again soon. But Daniel stayed behind, helping her clean up the porch. "You don't have to do that," Emily said, gathering empty glasses. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." They worked quietly, the night air cool around them. When everything was done, they stood together by the railing, looking out over the dark street. The moonlight touched the wet pavement, making it shimmer like silver. "It's strange," Emily said after a while. "I didn't expect today to feel like this." "Like what?" he asked. "Alive," she said softly. "Different." Daniel looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "Sometimes all it takes is a few unexpected visitors to remind you what life feels like." She smiled, turning her eyes back to the street. The crickets sang louder now, and a cool breeze brushed against her skin. She wanted to say something else, but the words never came. Instead, they just stood there, quiet, close enough to feel the warmth between them. Finally, Daniel sighed. "I should go too." "Yeah," she said, though she didn't really want him to. He took a step toward the door, then turned back. "Thanks for letting us in, Emily. Your dad's lucky to have you here." You make this house feel alive." Before she could answer, he smiled, gave a small wave, and disappeared into the night. Emily stood on the porch for a long time, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading away. The night was still again, but her heart wasn't. Something inside her had shifted, something small, warm and new, as she closed the door and turned off the lights. She realized that the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt full. And somewhere deep down, she knew that what began as a simple visit had quietly become the start of something she would never forget. Part 3, Morning Reflections, extended version minus 1,000 words. The next morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, spilling soft gold across the living room. Emily woke early, still half dreaming of last night, the laughter, the stories, the way Daniel's eyes had lingered just before he left. For a moment she lay still, listening to the gentle hum of birds outside and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The storm was gone, and everything felt washed clean, as if the world had taken a deep breath overnight. When she came downstairs, the smell of coffee filled the air. Mark was already up, flipping through an old photo album on the couch. Steve sat near the window, talking quietly on the phone, while Daniel stood by the back door, staring out at the morning light over the wet garden. "Morning," Emily said softly, tying her robe around her. All three men looked up, smiling. "Morning, sunshine," Mark said. "We didn't mean to crash here so long, but this place has a way of keeping people." Emily smiled. "It's what Dad always said." She walked into the kitchen, started another pot of coffee, and sliced some fruit. The sounds of movement filled the house, the scrape of chairs, the murmur of voices, the faint clatter of dishes. It was simple, ordinary, yet something about it made her feel warm inside. For so long, this house had felt too big and too quiet. Now it felt alive. Daniel joined her in the kitchen, holding a mug. "You always get up this early?" "Only when I can't stop thinking," she said, glancing at him with a small smile. He chuckled softly. "That sounds familiar." I stood there for a while, not talking much, just existing in the same space, the silence comfortable between them. Outside, the sun climbed higher, glinting off the wet leaves and puddles. Everything shimmered in gold. Mark and Steve soon came in, carrying their bags. "We should hit the road before traffic picks up," Mark said. "Reunion's next week. We'll see your dad there." "You should come to Emily. He'd love that." "I'll think about it," she said, meaning it. They exchanged hugs full of warmth and gratitude. Steve winked. "Thanks for the food, the shelter, and the memories." Mark grinned. "Tell your dad we behaved ourselves mostly." She laughed as they stepped outside. The driveway still glistened with rain, and the morning breeze carried the faint scent of pine. Daniel followed them out but didn't get into the car right away. Instead, he lingered by the porch steps, mug still in hand. Emily joined him, wrapping her arms around herself. "You're not leaving yet?" He shook his head lightly. "Just needed a minute. It's been a long time since I've been here. Your dad and I built that fence out there, remember?" She smiled, following his gaze. The old wooden fence was still standing, though a little worn. "He's told me that story once. You argued for 2 hours about which side was straighter?" Daniel laughed quietly. "Yeah, and he was wrong, as usual." The sound of his laugh made her smile wider. It wasn't loud, it was warm, deep, and carried something sincere. Then silence returned, the kind that didn't need to be filled. "I didn't expect to feel this way coming here," Daniel said finally, his voice softer. "I thought it would just be another visit with old friends. But seeing you, being here again, it brought something back." Emily felt her heart tighten. "Something good, something real," he said. "This house, it feels like it's still holding pieces of who we used to be. Your dad, me, all of us. And somehow, you've kept that alive." She looked at him, unsure what to say. His words reached deeper than she expected. "I didn't do much," she whispered. "I just opened the door." "Sometimes," Daniel said, "that's all it takes." For a moment, their eyes met again, and the world seemed to slow. No words, no promises, just quiet understanding. Then Mark honked from the car, breaking the moment. Daniel smiled faintly and set his mug down. "I should go," he said. Emily nodded, though something inside her didn't want him to leave. "Drive safe." He turned to go, then paused. "Your dad's lucky, you know. You remind me of him, but calmer, wiser somehow." She smiled softly. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today." He grinned. "Then I'll quit while I'm ahead." And with that, he walked toward the car. Before getting in, he looked back one last time. "Take care, Emily." "I will," she said. "You too." The car pulled away slowly, disappearing down the road lined with trees. The morning light shimmered on the wet pavement as the sound of the engine faded. Emily stood there long after they were gone, staring down the empty street. Her chest full of something she couldn't name, something between gratitude and longing. When she finally went back inside, the house was quiet again. The chairs were pushed in, the dishes clean, the air still holding traces of laughter. But it didn't feel empty this time. It felt peaceful. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching sunlight dance across the garden. The wind brushed through the trees, and the smell of rain still lingered faintly in the air. Her phone buzzed a message from her dad. "Hope the guys didn't give you too much trouble. They mean well. Thanks for taking care of them, kiddo." Emily smiled as she typed back, "They were great." "The house feels different now, alive somehow." Her dad replied with a single line. "That's what happens when you let good people in." She set her phone down, her eyes stinging slightly. Maybe her dad didn't realize how right he was. Letting them in had done more than just fill the house, had filled something inside her that had been empty for a long time. The day moved slowly after that. She cleaned up the last few things, watered the plants, opened the windows to let in the cool breeze. Every corner of the house seemed to carry a memory from the night before. Mark's loud laugh, Steve's teasing jokes, Daniel's quiet glances. When afternoon came, she sat on the porch with her sketchbook, something she hadn't touched in months. The pages were blank, but for once she didn't feel stuck. She started drawing the old fence, the trees, and the curve of the road where their car had disappeared. Her lines were soft but sure as she drew. Her mind wandered back to Daniel's words. Sometimes all it takes is opening the door. She thought about that, how small choices could change everything. How one rainy morning could bring people back into your life, and how a single evening could remind you what connection feels like by sunset. The air had cooled again, but Emily didn't feel lonely. She looked at the road one last time, imagining the reunion next week. Her father's laughter, maybe even Daniel's quiet smile. When she finally went inside, the sky had turned a deep blue. She placed her sketchbook on the table, poured one last cup of tea, and whispered to herself, "Thank you." She wasn't sure if she was thanking them, the universe, or just life itself, but it felt right. That night, as she drifted to sleep, the house around her felt warm and safe. The echoes of laughter still seemed to linger in the walls, soft and comforting. She knew life would go back to normal soon, but it wouldn't be the same. Something had shifted, something gentle and lasting. Sometimes change doesn't come from storms or noise. It comes quietly through open doors and kind hearts. And as the stars filled the sky outside, Emily smiled in her sleep. Knowing one thing for certain, letting them in had changed everything.